Welcome to Outdrive, folks. I'm your host, Cliff Callis, and each week I'm bringing you actionable marketing insights you can apply to reach, connect with, and convert rural American consumers. Outdrive is powered by Callis, a full-service advertising agency with a focus on marketing rural America. Callis offers a wide range of integrated marketing services, including website development, search engine marketing, social media, video, and digital. We develop strategic and creative campaigns to build your brand and your business, and you can learn more about us at ecallis.com. Now join me in the front seat as we head out on the road to success. Let's go. Hey folks, welcome to Outdrive. We've got another great story to share with you today about life and work in rural America. You know, there are a lot of exciting things happening out here in the country. And every day, entrepreneurs, both young and old, are coming up with innovative ideas and turning them into some of the most exciting new products and services we experience in our lives. And that brings us to our guest today. Neenah Jain is the Chief Financial Officer for Armory Square Ventures. She is a lifelong Midwesterner who currently resides in Indianapolis. Neenah grew up on a farm and went to college for architecture before pivoting into accounting. She earned her accounting degree from SMU in Texas, and she has traveled and worked around the country throughout her career. Neenah brings a wealth of experience to our podcast today, having moved back and forth between the business worlds of Dallas and New York and more rural communities like the one she grew up in. As a partner at ASV, Neenah is a leader on a team dedicated to backing mission-driven entrepreneurs who strive to transform traditional industries and uplift their communities. And I'm pleased to have her on the show today. Welcome to Outdrive, Neenah.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. I think we have a lot to talk about. I'm really interested in hearing about your firm and the venture capital process, how it works, kind of things that you're looking to invest in and kind of things you already do. I always want to talk about technology and how it impacts your business and your industry because it's just driving so many things throughout the business world. And then I want to talk about rural America a little bit. And I know you grew up in rural America and have lived that lifestyle. But before we get into all that, please tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So great. So I grew up primarily in the southeast part of the U.S. We moved around a bit growing up, but always lived in rural America until I went off to college. My parents had a cattle operation. They raised Angus cattle primarily for breeding purposes. We raised them. Bulls got sold out west for breeding purposes. And then we showed a lot and sold a lot to kids for showing for their 4-H projects, for the National Junior Angus Association. And so that was all we knew. And that's what we grew up doing.
So showing cattle, that's kind of a common thread really in our podcast, believe it or not. A lot of kids have grown up and were in 4-H or FFA, and they talk about that experience and how positive it was for their life. Talk a little bit about that experience from your perspective.
I don't think anything can really replace growing up in that way. The things that you learn growing up on a farm, whether it's cattle or crops, it's hard work. It's hard work physically, it's hard work mentally, and it really prepares you if you leave the farm. And I think growing up and having parents that own their own business, I think you learn something different as well. For many years, my dad worked for other people, and then he went in partnership and had his own business in partnership with someone. And you learn to treat your job not as a job, but as if it was your own. And I think that has, in addition to the hard work, knowing that I've always kind of treated my job as if it was my money, my ownership. I think people trust you and they respect you for doing that because it's not a very common thing. I think kind of growing up in that situation, it gives you that different perspective, and then the hard work piece. I mean, no matter what, there's always going to be someone that's smarter than you. It doesn't matter how smart you are. But one thing that you always have control over is how hard you work. So you can always be the hardest worker. And, I was reading something recently that it said that people that are hardworking and have grit are 2 times more successful than those that are just smart. So, I think that goes a long way.
Interesting. I love the use of your word grit. I think that is a phenomenal word for business people. And it means different things to different people. I mean, I remember that, I think it was John Wayne movie, True Grit, and that meant something entirely different, but it does kind of characterize the hard work that goes into building a business and owning a business. And I agree with your kind of your takeaway, your life lesson on a person that owns their own business and the perspective that you get. Because if you own your own business, the truth of the matter is it never goes away. It's there with you 24/7, 365. And regardless of what you try to do to occupy your mind and interest in other ways, it's still always there. And it does give you that perspective of the seriousness of what it is. And it would be wonderful if everybody had that same mentality of, I'm an employee here, but I'm going to treat it like it's mine, because it does bring out really a higher level of commitment, dedication, and execution of work. So today, you're a CFO for a venture capital firm. First of all, do you think that the fact that you are a financial person has any change in the way that you view your role at that company?
Absolutely. It's interesting, like finance is not always the most interesting part of businesses. The product, the sales is, much more interesting, much more flashy. But, one of the things I've learned kind of early in my career, everything comes through finance. It's kind of the heart or the center of what you're doing. No matter what, everything kind of comes back to money. So kind of being in finance, yes, the numbers are important, but, it also gives you a lot of connectivity to every part of the business.
Absolutely. Numbers always seem to play into the decision-making. And it's always been interesting to me over the years, looking at different decisions that are made and how some really rely on the numbers to make the decision and others not so much. And I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason to those other than maybe philosophy or experience or, sometimes gut feel. For, the numbers maybe don't work, but it really feels good. And so we're going to make that decision to move forward. So I love that perspective. Well, tell us about Armory Square Ventures.
Yeah, so Armory Square, we are a venture capital fund. The headquarters is based in upstate New York. And we invest primarily in B2B software and marketplace companies. The firm was originally started, Somak, who's the managing partner, was recruited by a group of people to leave New York City and move to upstate New York. The office is in a little town called Skaneateles, which is a beautiful little town on the Finger Lakes, about 30 minutes outside of Syracuse. And so he was recruited there because there's so much talent in upstate New York. You have some great universities, Cornell, Colgate, Syracuse, RIT, but nobody wanted to stay there. All the young people were leaving. Historically had some great companies like Kodak and Corning that are, not as big as they once were. And it's like, how can we help upstate New York thrive? New York is more than just upstate. So that's how the fund started back in 2014. Since then, we're currently on our third fund. And since then, the thesis has expanded. And our primary thesis is to invest in companies outside of the traditional places that VC deploys a lot of money, which is primarily Silicon Valley and major metro areas. And so, our thought was there's a lot of people out there that are doing really interesting things that may not have access to capital. And so that's what we're trying to do.
What are the advantages of someone using a venture capital funding method versus, let's say, a conventional bank loan?
Right. So, with VC, primarily the investment is done in equity. It's not debt. So we invest our money. We hope that the company is going to be wildly successful. We'll eventually sell the company and everyone will do well. But in VC, there's at least 50-50 chance that that's not going to happen. One kind of benefit for the entrepreneur is if things don't work out well, they don't have that debt looming over their head. It just kind of goes away. It never goes away from a bad situation, never goes away from, your heart or mind, but it doesn't hit your pocketbook. And also I think if you have the right VC involved in your company, we really try and act as partners with the company, kind of consultants. We have the opportunity to see a lot of different companies, A lot of different stages. We've all been doing this for 20 years or so. So you have a lot of different perspective that you can share with people in that way. And, we usually are very involved in the boards of the company and things like that. Whereas debt, you take the debt, you make your payments back, and they're not necessarily, a real business partner of yours. So that's one benefit. On the flip side, taking venture capital money is expensive. It's probably more expensive than taking debt. You really have to have the trade-off of what you're trying to do and where you think you're going. And I think one of the things that VC looks attractive for a lot of people because of, not having the debt covenants and the repayment schedule kind of looming over you, but not every business should be funded by a VC. I think things got a little bit crazy in 2020, 2021, and businesses took VC money and they weren't really, venture scale. And when we talk about something being venture scale is it going to be a super fast growing company? Because taking venture capital money and not being able to really scale fast, then the numbers really don't work out to anyone's favor.
So what you kind of described to me is Shark Tank, and maybe it's Shark Tank on steroids. I don't know the numbers side of it, but such a popular show. And our youngest daughter's 13, and she has grown up in our business, basically just because my wife works in our business. We talk about business. She hears it. She loves Shark Tank. And so we watch it quite a lot. And it's interesting the kind of things that they choose to get involved in and not choose to get involved in. And I love their perspective because looking at it through my eyes, if you were trying to position yourself to take on a venture capital firm, such as yourself, perhaps, watching that show could help you kind of mold your business and your business model on the things that they're looking for. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I wish our job on a day-to-day basis was entertaining as Shark Tank, but it is basically the same thing, just kind of on steroids, and made for TV. But yeah, a lot of the questions they ask are very similar to kind of the things that we look at. We look at the entrepreneur as a person. Is this the kind of person that we want to get into a relationship for the next 5 to 7 years and work with? The other big thing is there product market fit? Like some things are so interesting and you're like, you can be so excited about something, but are people actually going to buy it? And those two things don't always go together. And so trying to figure out that, with very little data, is it going to be something that people want? It's sometimes a little tough.
So it's 5 to 7 years. Is that your typical engagement participation?
Yes. Some are shorter, some are much longer. Sometimes it depends on the industry. In my experience, medical device takes a lot longer. In some companies you can grow in and they're ready to exit in maybe 3 or 4 years. But usually kind of the sweet spot is probably 5 to 7.
And you mentioned selling. And I assume that there are different types of exit scenarios, and that one is maybe you invest, you recoup whatever you take, and then you go away and leave them with their business. Or do you only look for situations where the owner's long-term goal is to sell the business, and then that's when you exit as well?
Yeah. So primarily, we're looking to invest where the entrepreneur and we would want to sell the company at the same time, whether that be the typical exit paths are, traditional M&A. For instance, we had a company that it was software related to knowing how much fertilizer to put. That company got sold to a company by the name of Yara. So it's a strategic exit. Many times I would say that's probably the most common path is, you grow something and a bigger company says, okay, I need to have that as part of my portfolio. That's going to help my business grow. Also, private equity is a path. Private equity is many times putting companies together. So it'll take and buy a lot of different companies in similar spaces and put it together to make a bigger company. So that's one option. In my experience, that has been less common. And then the third option is going public, which right now, the very, very, very few companies are going public right now. But, the window opens and it kind of comes and goes. But, that can be a very good way to exit. Then you kind of have your choice of when you want to sell.
Well, you mentioned sweet spot earlier as you were talking about time frame for an engagement. Are there other types of sweet spots that you look for? Industry size, dollars, etc.?
One of the things that we really like to invest in, it's not the only thing we invest in, but we like to invest where companies, where there's a technology that's disrupting an old line industry that it hasn't had a major disruption. So our biggest winner from our investment perspective so far at ASV has been a company by the name of ACV Auctions. We invested in that company, and it is a used car marketplace. So it has disrupted the physical buying and selling of cars at a physical auction and has turned it all into kind of an online process. That company did great. It went public back in 2021. That's been a big success for us. And that was in Buffalo. So upstate New York is much like the Midwest. If you look at it, and, Buffalo could have been Indianapolis or Kansas City or, anything like that. And it was a great success for the city. I believe they're going international. It's really been great. And it's really kind of helped propel the industry forward. It also has helped us, in effect, with not only understanding the market, but kind of adjacent markets. So investment that we recently made was in a company called Machinery Partner, which the people from ACV, we had them look at it with us, due diligence with us, and, they invested personally as well alongside us. But that company is basically doing something very similar to ACV, where it's heavy equipment. And so it's a way to buy heavy equipment without having to go to a dealer. Most people don't live that close to a dealer, and they may have one dealer as an option. And so it doesn't really give them choices on buying the best product or the best price. And, this is kind of opening that up and kind of changing the way heavy machinery is bought as well.
Interesting. So do opportunities usually come to you, or do you seek them out directly?
It's a big mix. We have a big kind of outbound sourcing. We have usually 1 to 2 people kind of focused on scanning databases of new companies and accelerators that are helping companies get off the ground. So we have a lot of outbound kind of communication and conversations happening, but we also have a lot of inbound. So because of our investment in ACV, if entrepreneurs are doing kind of research and they look and see, okay, what companies are like my company and who invested in them in the past, then we get inbound deal flow. And that's sort of how Machinery Partner came to us. They had been looking at ACV, and they were talking to different people, and we got that introduction, which I think is going to be kind of great for both of us. Then also we have deal flow from, other VCs. So we may invest in a deal, but, lots of times we syndicate it. So if say it's a Series A, we may lead the investment round, but we won't do it all by ourselves. We need other partners to invest alongside us. So, we like to always be kind of in constant communication with other VCs. I think in some places it's more competitive and people don't want to share deal flow, but I think what we're looking at and where we're looking at deals, it's very collaborative.
Are there minimums, either a minimum dollar investment or minimum percentage of equity that you take? If somebody's listening and they're thinking, this sounds interesting, how do they, sort of qualify themselves to perhaps be a partner with you?
Right. So, we usually invest, I would say, late Series Seed or Series A. So usually there's some sort of product market fit. We don't really have a revenue minimum, but, I usually say, $500,000 to $1 million in revenue would be great. But we've certainly gone up and down from there. And our investment size, we usually like to own 10% of the company. Our initial check size between like 1.5 and 3 million is our initial check. So, we'll write a check for, the Series A, and the company continues to perform. We'll participate in the Series B and beyond.
And do you get involved in the strategic side of helping them grow their business?
It depends on kind of where their gaps are or where our network is. So we typically will invest in companies that either we directly have a lot of experience in or someone close to our network does. That's one of the requirements. So we won't invest in something where we're like, oh, this is super interesting, but I know nothing about it, because we can't really provide value in that situation. So we do like to get involved. We're usually on the board. If not on the board, we're observers. So we usually have frequent conversations, with management about the strategy, the operations, and try to make introductions to people that are going to help them figure things out the best that they can.
So as the CFO for Armory Square, what's your role look like? What do you do?
Yeah, yes, we're a small firm. So everybody wears a lot of different hats. So part of what I do is I do kind of investor reporting to our investors. So, I tell companies like they're raising money, but we have to do the same thing. So we understand it's a hard thing to do. It's a bit painful at times, but it's what makes it all work. So, communication and letting our LPs kind of know what we're doing and how their money is doing. I also am pretty involved with various different CFOs of our portfolio companies. Everyone on our team has a little bit different skill set. So not every person is involved with every company at the fund, but lots of times I get involved in looking at the financials for quite a few different companies. I'm also involved in sourcing and deal flow, primarily in, the Midwest. So that probably takes up about 30% of my time.
So does your firm also get involved in the marketing side of a business in some way, either in referrals or just outside perspective sometimes is very valuable to an organization that gets a little myopic with what they're doing? It's one of the things that we feel like, and our clients tell us that they like is, you guys know us, but you know us from a different perspective than we know ourselves. And you're able to give us kind of an unbiased viewpoint. And that's pretty valuable to kind of round out a strategy.
Right, for sure. I think relationships is probably the key to any business that you're in, and ours is no different. So I think it's just knowing and having those relationships and being able to leverage them at the right time and being able to say, okay, you may be struggling with marketing right now. Who do we know that you can talk to that can help you get over this hump or help you figure something out? Because it, might be simple messaging, but someone with that right experience can kind of help unlock tons of value.
Yeah. You mentioned fertilizer a little while ago and a success story for you guys. Is agriculture an industry that you're really focusing on?
I personally, with my background, I would love to invest a ton in ag tech. Sometimes ag tech can be a little bit challenging in the fact that there's only a few buyers of the technology. And I think, that's limiting sometimes from a VC perspective. But, the impact that ag tech investing has is so enormous. I think ag tech and healthcare, like you really can't have more, impact than those two. So it's very exciting. And I live in Indiana. Purdue is right up the road. So there's lots of great stuff coming out of Purdue. So I'm hopeful that in the next fund, we will have some ag tech investments.
From a technology standpoint, how has technology impacted your industry, the venture capital industry?
It makes everything faster. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at deals, processing deals, it's just ever changing. And so I think it makes it a lot faster. Because we're a small industry, there's not a lot of direct investment into VC to make it faster, but, we kind of use a lot of different tools that other industries are using to kind of help to figure things out a little bit quicker.
What about social media? Social media impacted your business or industry at all?
Definitely. I'm personally not much of a Twitter user. I guess now it's called X, but most VCs I know, I'm not sure how they get any work done because they are so consumed about what's being said in the Twitterverse. But, a lot of information is shared, that way that before the information wouldn't be shared. I feel like there's a lot more knowledge, sometimes misinformation, but lots of questions. At least it makes you think about things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about otherwise. There's also some venture funds now that are doing podcasts, much like Shark Tank. People who aren't even in VC are finding it interesting kind of because of the personalities and how they're talking about companies and growth and things like that. That's interesting, whether you're necessarily in that business or not. And, we're even finding that TikTok is becoming an interesting platform. Like it's moving away from the dance and the funny little memes that it was. And it's giving people like a short format to kind of push out information in an interesting way.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's a very forward-thinking approach, I think, from what I would think would be a fairly traditional industry. That's very cool. And thinking about podcasts, and I think about podcasts all the time, but I could really see how it would work for an organization like yours or an industry like yours, because I would think a would-be partner of yours, a business owner, might like to hear about some of the success stories you've had, or maybe some of the ones that didn't turn out to be as successful as everybody would have hoped. From your perspective, what makes or breaks a deal, or what can make or break a deal when somebody's looking for funding from someone like you?
The first kind of make or break is just the person. If we get on a Zoom call, if we sit down for coffee and the person comes across as arrogant, that's the first kind of deal breaker. Like I said before, it's all about relationships, and you want to know that you're kind of going to be working with someone that you want to work with for a long time. One of the things that we talk about is before we do a deal. So, some venture funds invest in small checks in a lot of different companies, relative to their fund size. We invest bigger checks for our fund size and fewer companies. So we will only do maybe 2 to 4 deals a year of new investments. And so, we really want to know this is a right fit with personnel wise. And after you have that meeting, are you still thinking about that company? Are you still thinking about that person? Do you want to quit your job as a VC and work at that company because you're so excited about that person and what they're doing that you would want to quit what you're doing? So that's kind of the first in or out, whether we have a subsequent conversation. And, and not every person is for everybody. So that doesn't mean just because you're turned down by one VC doesn't mean that it's not VC fundable. For sure. There's so many different factors, stage of your fund, where you're looking to invest, that we've looked at things sometimes and like, oh my gosh, I really want to invest in this. This is so exciting, but it's just not the right time for the fund because maybe, it's just a little too early or something like that. That's the kind of the first, the next is we really spend a lot of time on product market fit and trying to figure out, is this something that a lot of people are going to want to buy?
It was kind of a process, and you kind of check the boxes as you go down and get a little bit more serious. We kind of call that circling the wagons in our world, circling in to find out whether it's the right fit, whether it's the right time, where everything works together. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, we circle the wagons and circle them again, and then circle a couple of wagons and keep going until we feel good about it.
Very interesting. Hey, Neenah, I've really enjoyed visiting with you this morning. This has been really an eye-opener for me. I've not had a venture capital representative on the podcast. I've never worked with a venture capital firm in my career. It's been interesting, and I've really enjoyed it and enjoyed getting to know you as well. The focus of our podcast is marketing to rural America, and certainly after visiting with you, I understand how this has been really relevant to our audience and even some of the people that have been on our podcast as guests. But when I say those words, rural America, you having grown up in the country, what kind of thoughts and images come to your mind? What does rural America mean to you?
Oh, to me, it's green fields with Black Angus cattle and a great sense of community and pride.
That's very succinct. And I had that same picture in my mind. In fact, I drove by that this morning on my way to the office. Well, thank you again for being with us. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience today? Before you answer that question, though, please tell us if there was somebody out there listening today that's interested in what you have to offer, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So the best way to get a hold of me is either via LinkedIn, my name, Neenah, last name Jain, or to send me an email, my first name, Neenah at ARMORY, S as in square, V as in Victor.com. That's the easiest way to reach me.
Perfect. Now, I'll let you answer. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience today that you think they might find interesting or inspiring or beneficial in any way?
I think COVID has actually helped rural America. We've seen from where we invest, people are wanting to move to more rural areas. The quality of life is so much different. And for many, many people, it's so much better. I know it's certainly when I started my career in the late 90s, like you kind of felt like unless you were going to stay home on the family farm, which is great. And lots of people want to do that. And that's fantastic. But if you wanted to do something else, you had to move to a bigger metropolitan area. And I think that's becoming less and less the case. And I think everyone will prosper by being able to do that. You can work as a software engineer and go out and feed your cows in the afternoon. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think there are an amazing number of opportunities that are available, and they're everywhere. They're not just in rural America, they're in urban areas as well. But there's a quality of life in rural America that you really don't find anywhere else. And, because of broadband, because of technology, you can pretty much work anywhere. And you're right, COVID kind of proved that to people and kind of forced them out or motivated them or inspired them to get out. So I think you have a great perspective on that. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our podcast, really, is just educate people who have never lived in rural America or spent much time here, how great it really is. So thank you for being on our show this morning and sharing that with us.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Folks, thanks for listening to Outdrive. I hope you've enjoyed our visit today with Neenah Jain, Chief Financial Officer for Armory Square Ventures. Come back again next week, and I'll take you down the roads of rural America, where it's heaven on earth.
Thanks for taking a ride with us on Outdrive. This episode is complete, so head on over to ecalis.com for more insight you can apply to help drive your business growth. And be sure to sign up for our free monthly e-letter, Outthink, for even more helpful content about marketing to rural America. Have a great day and keep on driving.